Welcome to this week's episode of the Right for Your Life podcast. We have a very fun episode for you all this week. I'll be sharing a little trip report from my recent trip to the Carolinas. We're going to be covering the Billy Graham Library, Broadway at the beach, Ripley's Aquarium at Myrtle Beach, concert series we went to, and of course our trip report from CAROWINDS. So all this and so much more here on this week's episode of the Rive Your Life podcast. You don't want to miss a second, so go ahead, buckle up, because here we go. Welcome to this week's main segment of the Rive Your Life podcast. As I mentioned in the cold open, and as you've seen on our social media today, our topic and our main area of discussion, if you would, is just a trip report from a recent trip Kinsey and I took to the Carolinas. We did some pretty cool things there, and I'll be talking about each of those things. I don't know how long this is going to be. I'm just going to share what's on my mind and heart and all that about it. But as I mentioned in the opening, some of the highlights of our trip was the Billy Graham Library, which is about 20 minutes from CAROWINDS, which is really cool. We also visited Broadway at the beach in Myrtle Beach, and we did the Ripley's Aquarium there as well. We attended a Southern Gospel concert series, I guess if you would call it that. While we were down there, it's called Singin in the Sun. It had some of our favorite artists there. We'll mention that. And then, of course, the beach. Yes, and CAROWINDS too. We'll talk about CAROWINDS. But it's such a fun trip, a good getaway. Just after the craziness of Easter and just things, it was nice to get away just to enjoy what the Carolinas had to offer. So one of the first things, and I'm just going to go in no particular order. I kind of have an order here, but I do want to start by talking about the Billy Graham Library first and foremost. This is one of the highlights of our trip. And I know why you all are here, and I'm going to save that to the very end of the trip review. I know you're here to hear about CAROWINDS and our thoughts about CAROWINDS. That will come later, but I want to highlight this attraction that's not very well known. I've known people who've been to the Carolinas, who live in the Carolinas, that have never been there. And the Billy Graham Library is such an underrated attraction. It's amazing, honestly. And I'm going to adjust my mic here real quick. All right. There we go. So the Billy Graham Library. Honestly, I can sum it up with two verses here. And those verses being from 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And verses 17 and 18 says, "For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect." And then verse 18 says, "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God." And that's truly the whole mission and the whole theme of the Billy Graham Library. It's not just about the man Billy Graham, but the message that he preached. And you could clearly see that throughout the library there. So I'm going to take you on a little journey of faith here, as they have like all in their brochures and just throughout the museum and grounds there. I'm just going to walk through step by step what the experience was like, and then I'll talk about it more in depth. So as soon as you pull onto the library grounds, it's beautiful. It's very floral, just amazing. The groundskeepers there are amazing. And I want to make this note real quick. The Billy Graham Library is not ran by full-on employees. There are employees there, but it's solely based off of volunteers who give of their time to spread the gospel, to be an encouragement, and to pray for folks. And I'll mention a little bit more about the praying part. when I get my thoughts about the Billy Graham Library. But as soon as you pull into the parking lot, you find a spot. There's plenty of parking spaces at the library. But once you come up to the front, there's a host and a hostess as you make your way up to the front by where the this barn structure is, a house, and then a garden. And these folks are just very welcoming. Hey, welcome to the library. Is this your first time here? Have you been here? All that stuff. Just being very hospitable, very nice. And then you have, as I mentioned, three options of different directions you get to go. So I'm going to just go around this half circle here. It's a half circle. The first thing you come up upon is a house, and that is actually Billy Graham's house. And for those who don't know Billy Graham, I'm going to back up here because I'm going to be saying Billy Graham a lot. And if you don't know who Billy Graham is, which how could you not know Billy Graham? And even for those who are not Christians, you probably have heard this name. But Billy Graham was an evangelist, especially in the, I believe, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And he started slowing down a little bit in the 2000s just because of his age. But Billy Graham was an evangelist, one who would go traveling the country and even the world and just tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ. He was known as America's pastor. And he was a very good mentor and a spiritual leader to even our presidents. I remember seeing John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, the Bushes, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Trump. He was a he was a president's pastor. Honestly, he was a leader and a spiritual guidance to our leaders of this country during his time here on Earth. So I forget the earliest president that was he was like a mentor to, but we'll talk about it later. I keep saying later, but there's an exhibit in there that talks about all the leaders he got to be an influence on. But Billy Graham, he was an amazing man of God, preached the gospel boldly, and not only did he make an impact on America, he made an impact on the world. And just as we mentioned here in the opening scripture, for the preaching of the cross to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved is the power of God. And that's what Billy Graham believed. He believed in the cross. He believed in the message that Jesus Christ came to this earth, lived a sinless life, died on the cross, was buried, and rose again, and is coming back. And sadly, our loss is heaven's gain. Billy Graham went to be home with the Lord in 2018. I remember it very vividly. I remember watching it on TV. But his legacy was just poured into this this attraction, if you would, this library. And you could just sense what he believed when you visited this attraction. He believed in the gospel. He believed in the cross, Jesus Christ. And that's what he dedicated his whole life to, is telling others how they can know Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior. But going back to the house that's on property, this was the house that Billy Graham lived in growing up. And I forget exactly where the house was, but what some folks did, I believe, when this library was built, they reconstructed Billy Graham's house. So they basically took the house piece by piece, dismantled it very carefully, and brought it to the property here of the library. So this wasn't his original homestead. This was just the relocating of his house. But once you go inside, you're greeted by one of the volunteers. They give you a little pamphlet here that says the Graham family home place, and it takes you on a little journey through his upbringing. And inside of that house, there are some original things that he grew up with, original, I guess, for lack of better words, artifacts from his upbringing. But there's a lot of replicas of things. So I believe his original Bible, his first Bible that he received as a child, was in there. A couple family pictures, and just little things that they could recover from the house back in the day and could maintain and keep over time were in there. But they did, again, replicate a lot of the indoor stuff to kind of reflect who Billy Graham was growing up. So you take a trip to the house. It's just a walkthrough tour. You can look through the pamphlet there, and it just talks about who his family was, what his upbringing was, and the faith of the family. But once you go through there, you come upon this big, huge barn with a cross etched in the middle of it. So it's one big, huge glass cross that you enter in. And the theme of the barn was you enter in through the foot of the cross, and that's how you can be saved. Is going to Jesus at the foot of the cross. That's where salvation's found, and that's where we come to know Jesus Christ, is through the foot of the cross. So once you enter this barn, and I've heard this said by the folks on the at the property, this is one of the cleanest barns you will ever see, and it's true. It is a legit barn. As soon as you go and you smell the barn smell, and minus the animal gifts, if you would, but it had that wood smell. It was really nice. But the first thing you do, as the greeters open the doors for you, they direct you to go to the front desk, and they gave you a set of a package of like materials to help you along this journey, if you would, through the library. And one of the things they give you is this Journey of Faith pamphlet that shows a map of the barn and the property. And this is kind of like your guide map for it. And they also gave you a survey to complete once you finished it. Sadly, we didn't do that. But once you brought that survey back at the end, just your thoughts on the whole property and everything, they would give you a swag bag, if you would. I believe there was a book in it, a couple little trinkets here and there. But as soon as you get done with the Welcome Center, the information desk, you're directed over to an animatronic cow. We didn't get to watch the whole show. But with the cow named Betsy, what old Bessie the cow would do is just give you a introduction, a little flyover of what you're going to experience. And then you'd go to this little sitting area where you could watch a little film on who Billy Graham is and broke down visually what you're about to experience. Once that film was over, you would go into a little bayou-looking area. So it's a little house, a little cabin that had like an AI Billy Graham, which was kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of weird saying AI Billy Graham, but he sets it up like, "Hi, I'm Billy Graham. This is what Jesus did in my life." Gave a brief testimony of himself, shared some scripture, and then once that was done, it showed another clip, and the doors swung open to the next room, which really was the introduction to Billy Graham's ministry start. So the name of the exhibit was "The World Discovers Billy Graham," and talks about the tent meeting, or the tent revival, that he attended as a kid. And that's where he felt the surrender to ministry, and where he knew God had a plan for his life. And from there, once that film was done, you would sit in these little wooden benches, by the way, inside half a tent that looked like what he could have been in when he attended that tent revival. They showed a film about him surrendering to ministry. People like, "Oh, you're going to grow up to be a preacher someday," things like that. Once you're done with that, you go through the back of the tent into a replica of the house him and his wife, Ruth Bell Graham, lived in. And there you got to learn about who Ruth was, in a little exhibit there called Footprints of a Pilgrim, and talked about who Ruth was, his wife, how they met, and where she came from. She was a missionary kid from China. So talked about how she got saved as a missionary kid, and then she came to the States to learn about ministry. She wanted to go back on the mission field, and through that time in college, she met Billy, and the two really didn't they didn't really hit it off at first, but over time they got to know each other, and they just fell in love. And it's a beautiful testimony of true marriage, and they were faithful to each other their whole life. And Ruth passed away before he did. I believe she passed away in the 90s. And Billy, again, passed away in 2018. But that's a beautiful testimony of a true marriage there, and a godly marriage. in there. So that was The Footprints of a Pilgrim, Ruth Bell Graham's story. And then you went into the next room. It was set up like a little theater, like a movie theater. And here, off to the corner, there was a replica of a radio station, and then in the center was like a big movie screen with like movie seats that you would sit in. And it talked about Billy Graham's influence in the media, and how he was always asked to come on late night shows, on news programs, Larry King, and all that stuff. They showed clips from that, and how he had a testimony that he shared with all those he came in contact with in the media, all the actors he had influence on, and things like that. So that was really interesting. And then the next room there was called The Man. And if I'm correct, looking here is a quick little glimpse of, again, Billy Graham's ministry, how he got his ministry started. And then Storm Warnings, The Hope for a Troubled Heart. And this one was set up in a little town. The Let me say this about the exhibits. They were first class. They were really nice. And this room here had some storefronts with some glass that was double-sided, and it had projections on it. It's hard to describe what it looked like, but it was really neat how they pulled it off, and just how Billy Graham, again, was America's pastor and helped through some very difficult times. They highlighted a lot of 9/11 and how Billy Graham was the hope for America, how he shared the gospel in a very troubling time. And for those of you, including myself, who lived um, at the time of 9/11, it's just uncertain. Yes, I was young. I was in kindergarten when that happened. Crazy to think about, but um, just I remember the chaos our country was in, just uncertainty, like what's going to happen. And just through that, Billy Graham was able to be the hope and light of Jesus Christ upon our country during that time, and helped lead us through that. So that room kind of talked about how Billy Graham, through the gospel, was able to be a help and a light during troubling times in our America and just the world. It even talked about Berlin, that he was there when the walls came down and things like that. It was influence there. And then the next room was one of the many. The whole museum was just impactful and powerful. But this next room here was talking about the message and the ministry of Billy Graham, and it was about, again, the cross. So as soon as you enter this room, there's a few little artifacts about um, his message. So they had a few of his Bibles in there, but ultimately, in the very center of the room was this tall cross that basically went from the floor to the ceiling, and right next to it was a crown of thorns that says the verse I just read: "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God." And that was Billy Graham's mission. His mission was to share the gospel to everyone he came in contact with. So that room was dedicated to the mission and the ministry of Billy Graham. And then the next room was The World of Flame, Impacting Evangelism Worldwide. And again, that talks about him going worldwide, not just in America, but he went to many different countries to share the gospel. It was almost like a missionary evangelist, if you would. And then that continues on. The mission, the gospel, continues with the world evangelism there. The next room here, I'm looking at a map here, so that's why I pause every now and then. Peace with God and Piercing the Wall. So this talked more about the Berlin Wall and his influence there to help bring peace during that time. And then the museum started to wrap up with the fourth gallery, which was Billy Graham's homecoming. A lot of pictures from that day. It was a beautiful ceremony, just honoring the life of this man of God and just the influence he had on folks. I remember watching on TV, like I said. Um, at the time, I was in college, or wrapping up college, and I remember watching that on TV, and just Christ was honored and glorified through it. They had many different speakers. Even President Trump at the time gave a testimony of how Billy Graham influenced him. And Mike Pence even gave a testimony about how Billy Graham influenced him. Um, a few other world leaders were there, gave testimonies. And a couple groups and folks who actually sang at Billy Graham's crusades over the years. So, like your Gaither vocal band, I believe Danny Goki sang because he lives. Michael W. Smith was there. DC Talk. So I believe it's just Toby Mac and Michael Tate. And one of the stories, this wasn't even in the museum here, but one of the stories I found very interesting that I've heard over time of those who gave a testimony of Billy Graham in his life was Michael Tate. Michael Tate grew up in a home with no father, and he was raised by his mom and his siblings. But he remembers Billy Graham basically taking him under his wing and just treating him like a son. And Billy Graham just had a huge influence on Michael Tate. And he went, like I said, DC Talk at the time, went on tour with Billy Graham and did like youth crusades. And they got to sing with his concerts there and help reach folks for Christ. And to this day, Toby Mac still gives testimony of that. But Michael Tate and Billy Graham's relationship was just a father-son. Billy Graham didn't see color. I know it's like a common phrase or whatever, but seriously, Billy Graham didn't care if you're black, white, gay, straight, man, woman. He didn't care who you are. He saw a soul that needed Jesus, and that just needs to be a encouragement to us as Christians. This needs to be a challenge for us as Christians to not see someone for who they are, but to see what their need is, and their need is Jesus Christ. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It doesn't matter, again, if you're black, white, red, yellow, black, and white, they're precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Jesus loves everyone. Whosoever is willing to come to Him for salvation, He'll save. So, and that's what the homecoming room of Billy Graham's library there is just saying Billy Graham lived a life that pointed people to Jesus. He didn't care who it was. Everyone he came in contact with was a soul that needed Jesus. And that's what his mission was, is to reach them for Jesus. And that needs to be our mission and goal as well. And then you went into a little room called Just As I Am, the Hour Decision. And for those who have attended a Billy Graham crusade, which I was very blessed to be able to attend one, I was really young. It was 2003. I went to a Billy Graham crusade. And fun fact, actually, on Saturday of the crusade, they had a kids choir from local churches come and sing at it. And I was a part of the kids choir. It's pretty cool. It's called the Kids Gig. And I'll actually post a picture of it this week on our social media here at Ride Your Life Ministries. The t-shirt that I had, I'll need to track down a picture of me in the choir. But yeah. So, but at the end of his revival, every single revival he did, the altar call song would be Just As I Am. Just as I am, and waiting not to rid my soul of one dark blot. To thee whose blood had cleansed each spot, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. And just the call to the cross was Billy Graham's mission. And that's how the museum ended. As soon as that film was over, Just As I Am, you walked through the cross to the empty grave. There's a beautiful mural there. I wish I could have got a picture of it. But you walked to the empty grave. That's what Billy Graham preached about. And again, this museum was not about Billy Graham. It was not about the accomplishments, the achievements of Billy Graham, but just a life that was dedicated to the gospel call. God put that burden and the call on his life to take the gospel. And this was just the gospel demonstrated through one man. Each exhibit had the gospel presentation included in it. Just from the beginning, as I mentioned, a man who is willing to answer the call after being saved, to live a life for Christ, to be married. The gospel shown through a godly marriage. The gospel shown through the gospel. The gospel through world evangelism. The gospel through looking past who people are, but seeing the need for Jesus. And the gospel to spread it to the world. It was beautiful. So, like I said, if you have the opportunity, if you're by Carowinds, have a free day. Check billygramlibrary.com. I believe that's what the website is. But check to see the times there. They're open seasonally. They got a few different things there. Yep, billygramlibrary.org is where you can look for that. You can find them on social media as well. But definitely check that out. I know it will be worth your while, and it'll be a blessing to you. As far as how long it takes to go through the museum, it's about an hour. Um, just to stop and read everything, it might be a little bit more, but roughly an hour to go through all the exhibits and things like that. Um, but once you get out of there with the museum portion, um, you're you're then met by some folks who are there to pray with you. So everybody who comes through, they have volunteers to stop everybody, ask for if there's something you need prayer for, and they just pray over you. It's beautiful. I loved it, and it's so neat. That day, funny little story here. So that day, I was wearing a Ride of Your Life shirt to Carowinds, and all the volunteers there were like, "What's Ride of Your Life? All this Ride of Your Life Ministries. That sounds really cool." So they prayed over that, and they prayed for Ride of Your Life Ministries. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So it was just neat to see that. But then the last thing on the property, once you get out of the museum, there's a few other different little things. I definitely recommend checking out billygramlibrary.org. Check out everything that's there. That's everything I experienced. But the last thing on the property is the gardens. So that's actually where Billy Graham is buried. Him and Ruth are buried on the property there. So their tombstones and all that are there. And then also some folks who helped them kickstart their evangelism and their crusades and things like that. They're buried on property as well. But that is the Billy Graham Library. My thoughts, I kind of shared them throughout, just talking about the exhibits and things there. But I loved this, and it is worth your while. It's free. Everything is free there, well, except for merchandise and food. But everything is free. The house, the tour, the museum tour, the grounds, everything is absolutely free. You don't have to pay for anything. Parking's even free. They just want folks to come and hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that was the Billy Graham Library there. And then also shout out to Justin, our good friend Justin Thomas. Shout out to him. He joined us for the day there. We just got to spend some time with him, fellowship there, and just got to experience the museum. He's been there before, he said, for like their Christmas events, which he said was really cool. Which I guess we'd recommend that to you all as well. We'd love to see that someday, but. We got to spend the day with him there and just catch up and most importantly, just experience this really neat museum. And it's honoring the life of a man who dedicated everything to the call of Christ. So that was the Billy Graham Library. Again, I highly recommend it if you're in the area, if you're going to Carowinds, or if you're just in the Carolinas, not even going to Carowinds and looking for something to do. Definitely check out the Billy Graham Library. It is worth every minute you're there. And you just feel the presence of God there. You just feel it is amazing. There's no words really to describe it other than amazing and powerful and impactful and influential on the Christians' lives, and even those who are not Christians. So that was the Billy Graham Library. All right. So the Billy Graham Library was one of the last things we did on our trip there. But throughout the week, we stayed in Ocean Isle Beach, so we got to experience the beach a little bit, had some fun there. And beautiful weather. I'd say that the Lord blessed us with some really good weather. It was in the high 70s, low 80s. You could not ask for better weather. And it really wasn't that... It was sunny, but not to the point where I would roast, because if I were to step outside in the sun, I would get roasted, but the Lord provided some really good weather there. Weather-wise, we enjoyed the beach. And then one of the days, actually 2 of the days, we went down to Myrtle Beach to experience Broadway at the beach, and we also got to attend a concert series, as I mentioned there, called Singin in the Sun. It's a Southern Gospel concert series. Some of the artists that we got to see that were some of our favorites. Greater Vision, some good friends of mine. Love them. Fun fact, they've known me since I was a little one, probably about 2 or 3 years old. They've known me for a long time. Good friends of ours, and it's great to see them. One of our favorite groups, Triumphant Quartet. Um, Definitely recommend checking them out. You might be thinking, oh, some of these groups have like a country sound, but some of these groups, well, it sounds terrible, but I love all the groups that were there. Really great folks. But if you're looking for a more contemporary sound with a little southern sound to it, Triumphant Quartet's one of those. They did a whole CD of modern worship songs. So I know they had Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone. They even had Toby Mac's Help Is on the Way. Um, Mercy by Ben Fuller was on there. Homecoming by Elevation, I think. Who I don't know if it's Elevation or Passion. Regardless, they have a whole CD of that, like modern and traditional hymns. A whole CD of that. It's really good. Very good sound to them. Very modern sound to them. Another group we liked, Guardians, not Guardians of the Galaxy. I joke about that a lot, but the Guardians, they were really great. The Sound, it's a dad and his two sons. They did a really great job. For those who've heard about Bill Gaither, the Gaither Homecoming, Guy Penrod was there, and the Easters, Jeff and Sherry Easter were there. Who else was there that we saw? A group called the Vaughn Family. They take modern songs and have a southern sound to them. It's pretty cool. I'll say this. I wish we could have sat through them and saw them, honestly, now that I think about it. But we wanted to experience some of the booths and meet some of the artists that were there. So we skipped out on the Vaughn Family, but we get to hear a few songs from them. But they're really good. Who else was there? Triumphant Guardians, Easters. Karen Peck and New River, they are really good too. If you're looking for that modern sound, they got that. Mark Trammell Quartet. Just a bunch of great artists. We enjoyed it. It was at the Myrtle Beach Convention Center. Really nice convention center there. So that was the Singin in the Sun. We did that for 2 days. And then we went to Broadway at the Beach, which if you've been to the island in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, it's basically a duplicate of that, but bigger. So they had some really neat shops there. Some of the stores that stuck out to me. There's one in particular I'm going to save for last because it was so cool. But they had a Villains and Heroes store, which they had a bunch of pop culture stuff. I'm a nerd for that. Love that. Then they had a Pop Funko store again. I'm highlighting some of the things I love. I know a lot of people like it too. But they had a bunch of candy stores there, candy shops, saltwater taffy, all that. They had a Wonderworks. We didn't get to do that. And then a Wahlburgers. We added Wahlburgers there. Mark Wahlberg, Donnie Wahlberg, Paul Wahlberg. They have their own restaurants. We ate there. Really great food. I wish they still had the one in Cincinnati, but it is what it is. What else was there? Again, a lot of candy stores, a lot of your trinket stores. They had a Christmas store. I love a good Christmas store, so they had that. But the one that stuck out to us the most, the one that we spent a lot of time at and went to multiple times, was a Quickie Mart. So we're not big fans of Simpsons. Just putting that out there, getting that out there. We're not fans of Simpsons, but we love Universal. So that was the closest thing we could get to Universal in the Carolinas. So Quickie Mart was a fake convenience store, I guess, from The Simpsons. But one of the key things there were these things called squishies. They're basically ices. So they're pretty good. Not the best icy I've ever had, but it was good. And then they had the Lard Lad donut. So if you've been to Universal, you know the big pink donut that they have there. They had smaller versions of that, so I got those for breakfast both the days that we were there. And then we got squishies multiple times while we were there. But that was a lot of fun. And then next door they had a 4D show similar to Universal's Simpsons ride there. So that was really cool. I thought it was really well themed. I'll give them that. Again, we're not big fans of The Simpsons, but that was really neat to see. So that was Broadway at the Beach. Just a quick overview of that. But one of the attractions we did do at the Broadway at the beach was the Ripley's Aquarium. This is similar to the one in Pigeon Forge, but this one had a few specialty things, if you would. They have their own pirate exhibit, like Pigeon Forge has, and which, by the way, all of these will be our trip reports will be visual on our YouTube channel, Epic Destination. So myself and Kinsey have our own channel. Ryan has his own channel, but you'll get to see video versions if you go over to Epic Destination right now. As of today, March 6th, we have our CAROWINDS video up. So our vlog from there, you can check that out after you finish this episode and see a visual version of what I'm talking about. But we're going to put out eventually, I don't know when, a quick video talking about Ripley's Aquarium, and then one talking about Billy Graham Library, kind of a visual version of that. I didn't take too much footage and pictures at the Billy Graham Library. I was trying to take it in, and then obviously we're hanging out with Justin there, but we'll be talking about that with some pictures and things like that we can find and use of it. And then I got some footage from the aquarium that we'll throw in the aquarium video. But anyways, so the Ripley's Aquarium was a 2-story aquarium, or 2-level aquarium. Had all your fish and things like that. I thought it was pretty neat. The selection of fish they had there was really cool. They had a sloth exhibit somewhere. We didn't see where it was, but cool if you're there. It was really neat. It took us about a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe, just to go through everything, see it, just take our time through the moving walkway, through the exhibits, and just check out the fish there. So that's pretty neat. I don't want to spend too much time on that in particular. Again, we'll have a visual video out here soon on Epic Destination. I'll leave a link to all this in the show notes below, but be on the lookout for that. That is all some of the minor things we did on our Carolina trip. Now, we're going to move on to why everybody's listening to this episode. I heard a lot of people say, we're looking forward to this episode. Can't wait to hear about your CAROWINDS trip. So we're going to talk about CAROWINDS after this commercial for Lodge Lovers. Are you a thrill seeker looking for the perfect place to rest your head after a day filled with excitement? Look no further than Lodge Lovers, the trusted and recommended lodging provider of Rive Your Life Ministries. Whether you're planning for your next coaster trip, vacation getaway, or adventurous expedition, Lodge Lovers has you covered. With a wide range of rental prices to suit every budget, you can find the perfect accommodation for your needs. As a faith-based company, Lodge Lovers is committed to providing comfortable and welcoming lodging for all sorts of trips and adventures. Plus, when you book with Lodge Lovers, you're not just booking a place to stay, you're making a difference. That's right, Lodge Lovers is proud to donate 2.5% of all bookings to help Ride of Your Life Ministries. And you can rest easy knowing your stay is not just enriching your experience, but also contributing to a great cause of reaching those who need the gospel of Jesus Christ. For your next unforgettable adventure, choose Lodge Lovers. Book now and experience the perfect blend of comfort, convenience, and compassion. Visit our website, riveyourlifeministries.com, to learn more and to reserve your stay today with Lodge Lovers. All right, and welcome back to this week's episode of the ROYL Podcast. I knew I had to leave this as the last thing we're talking about on this episode. I had to leave you with a cliffhanger. So here it is, our official review and thoughts of CAROWINDS. I have my map here, my trusty handy-dandy map to go through and help me remember everything we did. So, as a general overview of the park, it was a small park. Compared to parks we've been to, this is probably one of the smallest ones we've been to. It was a fun park. It is very tight. I'll say that. It reminds me of a zoo almost. That's the closest thing I could compare it to that I've experienced. But it had some really good rides there and some not so really good rides. And I'll mention which ones those are as we make our way around the map here. So we come up to the front gate, the entrance plaza, which I will say I love the plaza, the front entrance of Carowinds. If you've been to Carowinds or have seen pictures of this plaza, you know what I'm talking about. Fury 325 and Thunder Striker are the first things you see here. Um, but the cool thing about Fury is you get to walk over Fury. Fury is above you and below you, so you're surrounded by Fury 325, and it's so neat. But the cool thing also about the front gate is you get to choose which state you want to enter, and that sounds very weird because I'm pretty sure not many people get to go to a park that's in two states. I don't think there's any other park that's in two states, so you get to either enter on North Carolina or South Carolina. We obviously were pushed over to North Carolina, so we didn't get to experience the South Carolina, which I don't think there's any difference. But the way to tell which state you're in, down the center of the park is this line. So the Carolina line, one's like a dark blue and one's a light blue, so that signifies which side of which state you're in. So I thought that was really neat. Again, something that no other state and no other park can say they have is two parks in one, literally. So you're coming into the plaza, beautiful entrance. As soon as you enter, it Kenzie compared it to Hollywood. It had a Hollywood feel to it. It did. It is kind of coastal Hollywood, weird look to it, but hey, it is neat. Celebration Plaza, and I'm gonna save the reason you all are listening to this as the last thing I'm going to talk about. So we're going to take a left here. And the first attraction you come up to, or the first area you come into, is Thunder Road with Thunder Striker. What a lovely name. So I'm just going to go ahead and call it Intimidator. So we come up on Intimidator. It was a fun ride. I enjoyed it. It reminded me a lot of Diamondback, a faster version of Diamondback. And in our vlog, you'll kind of hear more of our thoughts as soon as we get off the ride and our comparison to it. I love Diamondback for the visualness of it, the scenic, because it has a really nice, you get to ride through Rivertown, ride through the woods. But I love Intimidator for the speed. That was a lot of fun. So Thunder Striker there, that's the first thing we did. And across from Thunder Striker is a little ride called Nighthawk, which I did not get to experience. So I literally attempted this 3 times on our trip. So the first day we were there, we got there on Saturday. That was one of the first things we tried to do. The line was long. I'm like, there's other things I want to experience here. I'm going to try tomorrow. I'm going to try on Sunday. So we try Sunday. It's down. So I'm frustrated because it's been a long time since I've done a wing coaster, or not a wing coaster, but like a Superman. I don't know what you call it. But and the fact that they're using Firehawk trains is like, I want to relive Firehawk. I miss Firehawk. I wish I could experience it still. This would be the closest thing to it, but it was down on that Sunday. Then, so we visited Carowinds 3 times. So on the third time, we were with our good friend John Engler, who was on the podcast last week. So he joined us for the day. We got to ride some rides, but not Nighthawk. So the line was decent. We're like, okay, it's 40 minutes. We'll give it a shot, whatever. So we're getting through the line. We get up to the stairs. I'm like, yeah, we get to ride it. I kid you not, the coaster breaks down as soon as we get into the lines. So they split us off to the different rows, and the stinking coaster breaks down. So we're like, okay, we'll wait this out. We'll see if they can fix it real quick. The train gets done. They get done with maintenance. Like, yay, we get to ride. No, we don't. So they do it again. They run through a cycle. The group in front of us goes, and they get stuck on the lift hill. So we're like, yeah, we're not messing with this. So we're done. So we knit. So I do not have a Nighthawk credit. So close, but clearly God did not want us to ride Nighthawk. So that was a bummer, and I wish I could ride that. But who knows? Its life may be very limited at this point. But anywho, let's go ahead and go around the park here. And once you get past that, we come up on Harmony Hall. Harmony Hall. I was not a fan of Harmony Hall. And I'll say this. I'll do an overview of food right now. We're going to take a break and talk about food. So we have the dining plan. So the Cedar Fair dining plan we have this year, as always. Carowinds did not have hardly any options for it. It was either chicken tenders, burger, hot dog, pizza, and barbecue. Not many options. And each stand has two things at least that you can choose. So I had a burger both times at Harmony Hall because I did not want pizza. I'm tired of pizza. I've had it too much. So it's like I've had enough pizza this trip. So skipping that. Kinsey had the barbecue. It's like I'm not in the barbecue mood. So Kinsey had that. But I decided to get a cheeseburger. I feel terrible ranting on this podcast, but it's just like, come on. So there was no toppings at all. You couldn't put like lettuce, pickle, or anything on there. So your options were very slim. The first time it was all right. I wish I had some kind of flavored toppings to it. But the second time I had it, I couldn't even eat it. It was very, 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 very 1,000 times very well done. And it's like it was not even edible. So I'm like, I guess I'm fasting for the day. I don't know, but yeah, that was Harmony Hall. Unless you have to absolutely eat there, I would not recommend Harmony Hall. But anyways, Chicky and Pete's was the other place we ate. It was really good. I wish we could have a Chicky and Pete's at Kings Island. Let me say this. If you want to get rid of Grain and Grill, if you're looking for a replacement, Chicky and Pete's is really good. I'm not a big shredded chicken guy. I had it there, and it was phenomenal. I love the sauce. The crab sauce, I believe is what's called. Crab sauce? I don't know. But the crab fries were really good. And the only complaint about that was there's too much seasoning on it. So it's like if you have too much salt on your fries, it's like, yeah, it's too much. But other than that, the fries were pretty good. And the shredded chicken, steak sandwich, whatever, was really good. Highly recommend Chicky and Pete's. And we're going to have it again later this season when we go to a few other different parks. But Chicky and Pete's, thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 5 stars. Beautiful. Loved it. So that was the food. So I need to get that out of the way. Okay, while I'm talking about food, ices. So we got the Drink Plan Plus this year. The size of the cups are phenomenal. I thought it was going to be like a small little kitty-sized cup, but it was a medium-sized icy cup. Highly recommended if you need a food or a drink plan for this season. Get the Drink Plan Plus. Get you an icy. It's good times. Ices every 15 minutes. I don't know if you need that many in a day, but it was good. So, yeah, that was the food. I had to get it out there so we could make it way around the park. But once you get out of Harmony Hall, keep going around the circle there. We have not Planet Snoopy, Camp Snoopy. How could I get those two mixed up? But Camp Snoopy, it was beautiful. We loved how it was set up. Just wish it was a little bit bigger, which apparently, I guess there's rumors going around for 2025. They're going to be doing an expansion, adding a few new attractions in there. So that looks pretty cool. And it made me very excited for Camp Snoopy at Kings Island this year. Just a beautiful area. I'm so excited for our version of it to see and kind of compare the two, but it was really neat. And just the theming and everything was just really good. So we didn't do any attractions over there except Boo Blasters, which I will say this. Carowinds Boo Blasters just went through a major overhaul. So the guns, the scoreboard, the targets, even some of the settings in there, you could tell it was recently redone because it actually worked. So it was really nice. I like it better than Kings Islands. I'm going to tell you that. The cars did not stop randomly. But it was fun. So the first time Kinsey beat me, the second time she may have beat me again. I don't know. But the third time I beat John and Kenzie, so it was great. Great way to get out of the heat a little bit, but that was the only attraction we experienced in Camp Snoopy. Very fun. So, moving out of Camp Snoopy there, we go to Aeronautical Landing was the next area there. So, Aeronautical Landing, and I'll say this for all Cedar Fair. Cedar Fair has been doing a fantastic job with theming, and Aeronautical Landing is no exception. It was amazing. And just down to the attractions and everything, it was a beautiful area, very clean, it resembled an airport terminal, like a runway almost. It was really cool. And I got to ride Afterburn in there, and it was a lot of fun. I love me a good invert. Just wish it had the restraints of Banshee. But other than that, it was a fun ride. And it was running one train, so I was like, I wish I could go faster, but it is what it is. And then while I was over there, I did the gear spin. That was a lot of fun. It's a flat ride. It's similar to something that's at the island in Pigeon Forge. I'm just comparing things I've done. It is a lot of fun, but as soon as you get in there, it slowly moves. I'm like, okay, this is a lame ride. Then it stops. I'm like, is that the ride? Really? It then starts whipping you. I'm like, yeah, I like this. I like get spin backwards. That was a lot of fun. So gear spin was a lot of fun. Just again, the theming of Aeronautical Landing was beautiful. We loved it. Loved me some good theming. Trying to think. Ooh, I'm gonna mention this real quick. So, if you don't know about Cedar Fair, has this, I guess, tradition or this. I don't want to say a running joke almost, but there's a lot of Easter eggs at each of the park that correspond with other parks. So Carowinds has a lot of references to Kings Island. So you just got to know where to look. So some of the ones I noticed, there's a nod to Racer in Aeronautical Landing. And then to our next attraction we'll talk about in just a moment, Copperhead Strike, there's some references to the Miami Valley River Lumber Company. There's a lot of references to Mystic Timbers over by Copperhead Strike. And then if you go to Harmony Hall, there's a reference somewhere to Coney Mall and Kings Mills Antique Autos. I geeked out when I saw those. I'm like, oh, there's Kings Island at this park. It's so cool. And I'm sure that's how everyone else feels when they come to Kings Island and see the Knott's Berry Farm, the Dorney Park, and the Carowinds and Cedar Point references. Like, oh, that's so cool. I can see my home park there. But that's something I mentioned to Kenzie. It's like, it's so neat to have a bit of home while you're gone. And so keep it up, Cedar Fair, I guess Six Flags now. It's just neat to see those little references and Easter eggs to different areas. But I'm not saying where any of these references are. Just keep an eye out, because you'll see some Mystic Timbers, some Racer, even Racer Radio shows up there somewhere. And Coney Mall. You'll see a lot of these references throughout Carowinds. It was so cool. I loved it. But anyways, moving on. Then there's Blue Ridge Junction, which is like their county fair. Is that what it is? No, Blue Ridge Junction is where Copperhead Strike is. And I have something to say about Copperhead Strike that I'm going to save to the end. I'll mention Copperhead Strike last. But there's that. So you got Aeronautical Landing and Blue Ridge Junction, which is where Copperhead Strike is. And the water park was obviously closed. The country fair, the only thing we did in there was the Carolina Gold Rusher. And what a ride that was. It was interesting. A very slow ops. It's what I wish Adventure Express was. If only they had the seats of Adventure Express and the theming of Adventure Express, that would be a solid ride. It would be higher on my list. But um, it's an interesting ride. Um, we rode it once, and that's mainly due to the seats and the wait time. The ops were quite slow on there, but it was a fun, fast ride. But the seats, you could hardly sit on. They're like almost like a small little board. Like you're on the edge of your seat, basically. And I'm not even trying to make that sound like, oh, we were on the edge of our seat. It's so of interest. We were literally on the edge of our seats because those boards were so small. I don't know if it's supposed to be like a kiddie coaster or what it was, but that was that. So moving along, let's see here. Next is the Carolina Cyclone. Okay, that was a fun one. Was it my favorite? Not really. It it was not a bad ride, but it's one that's like, it's a one and done for me. Um, it didn't hurt as bad as Vortex. I would compare it kind of to the Vortex because from what I've heard, they use the trains from Vortex there. So that was a lot of fun there to experience the Vortex trains in a not so hurting way. But that was Carolina Cyclone. And then the next one. Oh boy. Ricochet. It's a wild mouse, and it is wild. It hurt. That was one of my least favorite rides there. Not as bad as the coaster we're about to talk about here in a moment, but Ricochet hurt. And that was in Carousel Park. Would I ever ride Ricochet again? Heck no. But across from Ricochet is one that's lower on my list. Not just because of the name, but this ride was not made for guys. It was Vortex. And I have a bad history with vortexes. Kings Island's Vortex gave me blackouts one time. And that's when I'm like, yeah, I'm not riding this anymore. But this one is a stand-up coaster. That hurt. It was not made for guys. That's all I'm going to say. So Vortex was low on my list there. Carousel Park and other things in there. I think that's everything we did there. Thrill Zone. Here is a little wooden roller coaster named Hurler. Apparently was, and I'm doing air quotes right now, RMC'd. By RMC, it's not Rocky Mountain Construction. It was routine maintenance by CAROWINDS. And you can tell it was definitely not RMC'd. Not the RMC we wanted. It hurt. It's weird because the night before, I rode the very front row. Kinsey didn't ride. She was all done with rides for the night. So I rode front row, and it was smooth. It was fine. Butter smooth. I rode it once or twice. I forget how many times I rode it that night. But it was fine. I rode it. No complaints at all. The next day, literally the next day, I rode it with Kinsey. We're further towards the back. It hurt. I mean, I'm like, get me off this ride. This hurts. I'm not a fan of wooden roller coasters, and that is why. But it was painful. Never again. That is the spoiler alert for my ride rankings here. This was the lowest one on my list. Hurler was the lowest. And I believe that is everything until the very last two rides I want to mention. So the first ride I want to mention is the one I think everyone came to hear my thoughts on. Fury 325. That was so much fun. I loved Fury 325. And it was a rush. I'll tell you that, it was a rush. We got perfect seats on it every time. So I kid you not, the very first time we rode it, the very first ride on Fury 325, we were in the front row. And I mean, the wind was going. So we got wind in our hair. It was great. It was a phenomenal experience. We loved it so much. And then I believe it was that evening we went back to. It was one of the last rides we did of the day. The park closed at 10 o'clock, so we were there till close. And the very last ride of the night was Fury 325 in the dark in the back row. Holy cow, that was amazing! I loved it. Which one I love better, front or back? Oh man, I would have to say the back. If you're looking for a very, actually, I take that back. The front. I love the front because I believe that had more of, you could feel it in the front. Usually, like with a Orion, you feel it in the back. You want to definitely get in the back. Uh, I would definitely recommend the front if you're able to get the front. It was an experience. It was something. And then we also got to ride it in the dead center, the middle row. And it was great there too. There's not a bad seat on Fury 325. But Fury 325 was not my favorite coaster at CAROWINDS. This is why I saved this for the last. So Fury 325 came in second on my list of coasters at CAROWINDS. My number one coaster at CAROWINDS was Copperhead Strike. I know I'm about to get stoned for this. I know people are going to come at me for this, but Copperhead Strike was my number one coaster at CAROWINDS, and here's why. If it wasn't for Orion at Kings Island, Fury 325 might be number one on my list. But because I have Orion at Kings Island, I have something similar to it. You might be thinking, well, one's a Giga, one's not. I don't want to get into that debate. But it just felt like Orion when I wrote it. A faster version of Orion with a little bit more track. If I could be wrong, it just felt like a little bit longer and faster version of Orion. That's why it's not number one. Here's why I picked Copperhead Strike as my number one coaster at CAROWINDS. It's something I have never ridden before. I don't really know what to compare it to because I've honestly never ridden anything like it before. This is a coaster. If I could pick what goes in the spot of Vortex at Kings Island, that plot of land, this is what I would want to put there. Get rid of Backlot Stunt Coaster and make this big coaster behind the Eiffel Tower in that plot of land by, or where Stunt Coaster currently is, and Vortex. Have it go over you. Expand Rivertown. Make Copperhead Strike 2.0. That would be stinking awesome. A double launch coaster. If you could only ride one ride at CAROWINDS, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, definitely ride Copperhead Strike. You will not regret it. If both, I'll say this, if Fury has an hour wait and Copperhead Strike has an hour wait, I would say Copperhead Strike. Oh man, I'm gonna get so much hate for it, but I'm standing my ground on this one. Like I said, if I didn't have Orion at Kings Island, Fury might be number one. But since I have Orion, Copperhead Strike is number one. There you have it. Those are my thoughts on CAROWINDS. Overall, it was a great trip. Yes, we ran some little things here and there. I didn't get to ride Nighthawk, whatever. The food was a little nasty. Options were limited, whatever. But it was a great park. I'll give them that. And I don't think we ran into a single worker who had a negative attitude. So that kudos to you guys over there at CAROWINDS. Keep it up. The ride ops had a little bit of life to them in there. Over the mic is fun. Some of them are funny to listen to and interact with. And then the ride ops, I wish they were a little bit faster, but I get some of these rides had to run single trains. just because of maintenance and all that. But it was a great time. Would we go back next year? Probably not, just because there's other parks that we're planning on visiting. But we definitely want to go back to Carowinds to experience any new attractions it might have, and maybe even experience some events there. But we had a great time. We highly recommend Carowinds if you've never been. Just even if it's a one trip there, we definitely recommend it. Great coaster collection. But as far as my ranking of coasters, I'm going to go ahead and rank these here. But as I mentioned, number 1 was Copperhead Strike. Number 2 was Fury 325. 3, I would say, was Thunderstriker, aka Intimidator. 4 would be Carolina Striker, or Carolina Cyclone. And then 5, I would say, was probably the Carolina Gold Rusher. Yep, so that was our rankings. But I believe that's all we have for today here on this week's Ride Your Life podcast. As far as announcements, stay tuned to our social medias. Great things coming up. But I do want to highlight a couple things here. The second meetup of this year, second ROYL meetup of 2024. It will be to Kings Island on June 15th at 1 p.m. More details are coming out very soon. I promise we'll get those out this month. We just got to nail down a few things. But join us for that. Make plans to join us at Kings Island June 15th at 1 p.m., not 5 p.m., 1 p.m. on Saturday, June 15th. Mark your calendars for that. Coming up next week on the Ride Your Life podcast, we're going to be talking about Lord, Increase Our Desire, a desire for the things of God, a desire to get into His Word and to pray. So stay tuned for next week. Then the week after that, we have Miss Kate Stanford back here in the virtual studio to talk about some of her new music and just what God's been doing in her life lately. You don't want to miss that. And then to wrap up May, we have my good friends, Aaron and Marshall from Undaunted Pursuit podcast. They're back. They're just recapping on what God's been doing in their lives, just talking about the goodness of God, and just some other things. Which, by the way, we're already thinking 2025 for meetups. Stay tuned. But and then June, we'll wrap up the podcast with some guests and some topics you don't want to miss. RideYourLifeShop.com. Get your merch there. We got some 4th of July patriotic styles and designs coming out very soon. Stay tuned for that. We'll definitely have those out before the 4th of July, so you can get those. And as always, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X to keep up with the latest information on all things Ride Your Life Ministries. And you can visit us at rideyourlifeministries.com as well. And you can always text us at the ROYL number, which is 513-285-8319. Again, that's 513-285-8319. That's the ROYL hotline there. Hope you all have a great week. God bless, and we will see you next Monday here on the Ride Your Life podcast. Peace. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Ride Your Life podcast. We hope it's a blessing, help, and encouragement to you. You can connect with us here at Ride Your Life Ministries on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Ride Your Life Ministries. You can also find us on X at ROYL Ministries, and that's ROYL without the A. You can find us on our website at rideyourlifeministries.com, and you can text us at the ROYL hotline at 513-285-8319. And again, that is 513-285-8319. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast streaming platform, and also leave a review so that the word gets out to those who need to hear it. We hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next Monday. God bless.